Ні, йому принесли зараз.
А вона знає? Ви їй казали?
Так.
Що треба сюди принести?
Казала ж, так?
А, все добре. Ну, заканчивай. Так, а що там у нас з бомбежками? Ми на них плевать хотіли.
Так нема ж тривоги.
Пішли відбої.
We can start if you're ready.
Sure.
Yeah, ми можемо.
So,
So
what's the format?
I think that's the format. We just start to talk. То ми можемо почати, правильно? Зараз принесуть. Yeah, we can start to talk
Okay.
about IWPR activity in Ukraine.
Okay. Well, the first thing to say is it's really an honor to be here at the Ukraine Media Center and to be with professional colleagues and friends, and above all to be in Ukraine at this bittersweet anniversary moment and share this important and difficult time with you. IWPR is an international not-for-profit organization that supports local journalists and rights defenders around the world. A little higher. And we've been proudly working in Ukraine since 2014, 2015, and then rather significantly since the invasion. So I spent a good bit of time in Ukraine last year, and had been here previously, but this trip brings a lot of recollections back to me because I was here exactly at this time, exactly at these days. I came to be with my staff and be with your professional Ukrainian colleagues at this time as the terrible invasion began. But I just, the impression when you get here is so different from the impression that people think you will have. I know very well, having been traveling around and doing some reporting, that there are tragedies every day and challenges ahead, even perhaps these very hours. But the overall mood of the nation is not a mood of fear and tremoring as people feel from the outside, but rather of a quiet confidence because of the things you've achieved over the year, and we're really thrilled and delighted we've been able to be some small part of that, and no small part of your work. So, shall I? What's the next best step to explain?
I think we should talk more maybe about IWPR activity in Ukraine, and maybe you present some direction what exactly IWPR do in Ukraine and what kind of project run, especially during this very hard period that we faced since 24 February, almost a year.
Okay. Well, we're here in Ukraine because this conflict matters. We're here in Ukraine also because our work is fundamentally about the issue of freedom of expression and the incredible damage and danger that the scourge of disinformation causes. We really think this is perhaps the single greatest problem facing our societies today because it drives conflict, it divides societies, and it prevents us from solving grave, even existential global issues that are facing us every moment. And none is more clear or evident than the war that you're facing because it is based on a very clear and profound lie, which you can see right in front of you, the concept that Ukraine is not a valid nation, doesn't exist, and its people don't have a real language. These are all absolutely thorough lies, and this is the foundation principle of this war. So confronting that is really what this effort is about, and doing that through the incredibly talented professional voices of Ukraine, journalism and rights defenders and human rights researchers who have so much talent, so much courage, and so much bravery. Just in summary, IWPR is a 30-year-old organization. We started our work predominantly around the first Gulf War and then in the Balkan conflict, so we have had extensive experience in Bosnia and in Kosovo and in Croatia. We've worked in Iraq and Afghanistan for many years. We now have programming in Latin America, the Middle East, Africa, and in Asia, and as I said, a total of 30 countries. Because every country is distinct, our programming is quite different, but the principal point is to help local voices have the resources, the capacity, the networks, and the skills to be able to make their voices heard. And that brings us to our programming in Ukraine, which, again, the main pillar of it is to help local voices in Ukrainian journalism express itself. With the outbreak of the war, really everything has been focused on that war and on helping that journalism. And really there's three main components, which is to support frontline journalism and the reporting by local journalists, to assist in the training of safety and security training, and also provide flak jackets and equipment. And then in particular, a large component of our work, which is to support investigative reporting and investigative work into war crimes, and also identifying the perpetrators where that is possible. So those are the main three themes. And you, as the head of our Ukraine Voices program here, has done a particularly great job on some of that. So do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, I want to talk more about Ukrainian Voices project, but first I want to say that when this escalation happened, a lot of not only Ukrainian journalists but also international journalists faced these problems and was not ready how to deal in this very complicated situation. And such kind of project that IWPR run in Ukraine, it's like a drop of fresh air that highly motivate, support, and give a very important practical skills to the journalists, because you need to work and live, especially if we're talking about Ukrainian journalists, they have like a double challenges, because they not only need to highlight the situation of foreign, work in the front line, not only to be professional, objective, not emotional, but they also need to survive the situation, because they not only witnesses of what's happening, they are active participants, they involved in situation of war, they have relatives who live in the frontline territories, or some of them live in occupied territories, they have friends or even close relatives who are in combat line as a military. So for them it's like a very difficult challenges to be a journalist and to be a citizen of a country that have a war.
Well, you and I met in Kharkiv at a difficult moment when your very household was couldn't be occupied, so you know personally.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is also very motivated when you saw the director of IWPR in Kharkiv in northern Saltivka while a heavy shelling in a year ago it was spring, and it's really highly motivated because you feel this support. You understand that you are not alone and people care about what happened, and it is very important. And what do and run Ukrainian Voices project is first support a local journalist who prepare frontline materials, because we understand now that war that happened, it's not only physical, like not only military battle, but this war a part of big like global informational special operation which Russia run, and we need to be professional and provide us more information as we can. And of course it's very hard, especially if we're talking about frontline territories, and for this 9 years of war we are not prepared for this situation at all. Only a few reduction and a few journalists has personal protective equipment like flat jacket, helmets. Less than a few journalists pass through the training from the tactical medicine and know about protocol of security, how to work in the front line, because we never faced such situation before. And what do Ukrainian Voices project? We go to the frontline territory, to the journalists who are working every day in this very unsafe unsafe situation and provide them with a very important knowledge, very important skills that can save their life. And I think it's very important just give this support to journalists, because if you work every time in a very risky situation, you just behave okay, everything is okay, and nothing happened. But you need to be professional. You need to care about yourself and about people who are working around you. And also the main direction that also Ukrainian Voices work, it's small grants for local media and the media in relocation. We try to support media, especially small ones who are still working in the frontline territories, and we understand that it's very hard for them to survive and to continue work and to save the staff and the journalists who are working on these fields. Also, we provide some trainings that help journalists who are working as freelancers, who are now in relocation, to polish their professional skill. We provide mentoring for them and different kind of support. And just previous weekend we started first trainings for them, and now they run for a mentoring that lasts for 1 month, and after that they would be more prepared for this difficult situation and have more skills how to pitch their materials, how to communicate with international editors, and so on. And I think it's also very important to give such kind of support, because we know that a lot of journalists lost their job for different circumstances.
Yes, I'd like to just underline that while the conflict is such a terrible moment for the country as a whole, and you don't speak about it with any pleasure, but it's really important to say that it's a kind of high point for Ukrainian journalism. The effort that's being made, the dedication that's being shown, the production, just the quality of it, and in many cases, of course, the quality and the quantity of it. And I particularly want to underline what I've been able to experience, because you mentioned I've traveled around. I've traveled around to visit the projects and the programming. I've traveled around to understand the situation for your country and for the journalism, but I've also traveled around to participate in producing some journalism myself. The stories are unbelievable. It's an incredible honor to speak to Ukrainians and be able to be a witness with you to this. But it allows me to see the incredible skill that also exists within your professional community. It's just it's a great excitement to see the ability, the skills, the knowledge. And really, I would say that everything that the world knows about Ukraine in one way or another is based on Ukrainian journalism, because any international here is using at minimum a translator or a fixer or support or a researcher. That's on top of all of the great production that Ukrainian journalism is making. So we're really happy to be a participating organization with our donors, by the way, which is the British government, Norway, EU, the Dutch, and others, the USAID and others. We're really proud of that support and help to play a role. But this is an accomplishment, and a significant accomplishment of Ukrainian media and Ukrainian journalism. And it's a moment of pride, I have to say, even at such a difficult moment. So we're really glad to make that contribution. But the work is being done by really, some great colleagues in the Ukrainian professional media community.
Yes, and I want to add that we have two components in the Ukrainian Voices project. One is preparing frontline materials, and we have a net almost of 60 journalists who work in mostly in the frontline region, and they prepare materials, and we publish them in English. So this is also very important to also be present with such kind of materials in international community, in English speaking community, because we can state that we have a lack of good professional materials in this field, and this is most important, that it's Ukrainian journalists to produce this content, and we keep working in this. And also the other main direction, which we are not talking about war crimes, and we have justice monitors. It's digests that we produce weekly, and now we run 29 digest, so we just want to keep in focus the war crimes and the numbers of war crimes, the cases, not this only this horrible personal story that fly around the world, but also what happened next, how this case is produced in court, and so on, so on.
Yes, I had the opportunity to spend 3 days in Kherson, and grateful for the prosecutor's office, and we discussed the cases and the challenges of their practical efforts to bring justice to some of the terrible experiences that they're having there. And it just proves another significant way to take the story forward from the crimes really to the prosecution of the crimes, and how journalism can help to explain and clearly report on what the next steps are. I also want to note a component we're beginning, a new project, which will be to take some of the material that we're being able to produce with Ukrainian journalists and also with think tanks, and help make sure it's communicated more strongly in Europe, where the case for Ukraine, the knowledge about Ukraine is there, but not enough. And we think more information from Ukrainian journalists and think tanks will be invaluable. So we'll be pushing, working in partnership with them to distribute more material more widely around the world.
Yes, absolutely. This is a very important topic, and we're planning some round table around this war crime communication, because it's a very hot issue, and not only Ukrainian people who have been interviewed by a lot of international media ask what next. Would the enemy, would these people be punished ever, and when, if would, when? So it's also a question from international community, because it's not only the Ukrainian case, it's like issue of human rights and democracy, and if we allow without any punishment to conduct such kind of things, one country, it means that we legalize such kind of behavior. That's why it's very important to put this in focus and to talk about this more widely, and to share this digest. By the way, you can follow this digest. You can go to the IWPR website and find a newsletter and subscribe, and you receive via mail or via Facebook page of IWPR this Justice Monitor digest, and follow all this information which update weekly. So I encourage you to do this, if you do not do it yet.
Yes. You mentioned a lot of media production, but we really also see that there's a medium and long-term, goal within this as well, because there's a conflict ongoing. It needs to be reported on. There's crimes, there's prosecutions, and there's the terrible events that occur day to day. But Ukraine is also society information. There's a really social, incredible social experience that you're all having. And as you get through the conflict, let's hope it's much sooner rather than later, you will have your society to restructure and restore as you move forward into a democratic and European Ukraine. And that's going to need journalism. That's going to need good journalism. It'll in a way almost be more difficult to a degree, because it's more specific, more detailed, and a little bit more challenging to challenge yourself. But accountability is really what democracy is about, and journalism is the centerpiece of that. So what the skills that the journalism of today in Ukraine is demonstrating is also going to be invaluable as you move, hopefully in due course, to the closure of the war and the rebuilding of society and moving forward towards Europe.
Okay, maybe I wanted to say more about safety and security component, because it's really very important, and it's not only about tactical medicine, but this is also must-have skills for any for any citizen of Ukraine, because if you even do not planning to go to frontline can go to you, and this is what most media faced when they live, for example, in Zaporizhia, and in one time it's appear like a frontline, and so on. So you never know what happened in a few minutes, and you have to be prepared. And if you decided to appear in a frontline, you need to act as more professional as you can, because you simply do not have time to think. Each second can save your life and life of your colleague. So the main focus of our safety and security component, It's first tactical medicine, second how to use your personal protective equipment and from which part it consists. I mean, it's not only helmet and vest and your personal tactical medical kit, but you need to understand how make it your personal, how to deal with it, how to act in all this equipment, and this is all that we do in our training. And the main important issue about which, for example, military talk as the first very important things, it's safety protocols and how to behave and communicate with the military, how to understand why military, for example, forbidden to do something, say not go, and you say, okay, I have a permission, I have accreditation, I need to go to that place because I need to prepare materials. So we just explain simple things that maybe for, especially for international journalists, looks very confusing, but really it's very needed because of the situation, because of the security issue. And this is the main topics that we are focusing when we are talking about safety and security component.
Yes, we had a wonderful training in Odessa just a couple of days ago. It was very impressive to see, and it always reminds me that this is the kind of training that anybody should put themselves through again and again and repeatedly, because as you said, if you need it, you do not have time to think. And you may imagine that you've had that training 6 months ago or a year ago or longer. But at the moment when you need it, your mind will go blank a bit and you really need to be on auto. And the techniques are specific. The training is really brilliant. You found great people, Ukrainians, to lead the training. And for example, just a simple tool of your tourniquet can save your life and others' lives and really should be always with you. And it's really vital information. There's information that will keep you alive. So not only is it necessary, but it's necessary to be repeated as often as you think you can in order to make sure it's fresh in your mind, because as you said, when you need it instinctively and immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're working especially in the frontline region. So we go to Kharkiv, Zaporozhye, Dnipro, Odessa, because we want to be present and give this information to the local journalists. Not to, of course, it is needed for all the journalists, but they already working in this area. And for them, it's like emergency information.
Yes, and it's been great to be able to partner with the Media Center to have a facility, to have partners that we can use the networks and the facilities to make some of these trainings happen. That's been really useful.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can talk about IWPR activity for a long period of time. So maybe you have some question for us. We would be happy to answer.
Сергій Сайбондар, Укрінформ. По-перше, ми вдячні.
Sergey Bondar, Ukrinform, thank you for choosing our agency for this event. And second, I would like to report that for our journalists, your events and trainings were of utmost importance. Our representatives were taking part in such events. Our journalists also were direct participants of the warfare, and about 8 of our journalists are direct participants of the combat operations. And I would like to ask if you, or we can say that the war would not be over today or tomorrow, so we prepared a number of interesting projects. One of them is editorial project, and we gathered our journalists in the regions of Ukraine. They gathered some interesting stories that we would like to publish in English language. Isn't your institute planning to open an editorial direction so that we could use some of your help in that area?
I got most of it, and I'm sure we could discuss partnering. It sounds like you're doing a really interesting research there, and I'm sure that information deserves and merits being distributed as widely as possible. So I'm sure the team would be happy to discuss ways we can partner. Thank you.
Так, я також додам, що, звісно,
Yeah, and I would like to add that we can consider any proposals if they are in line with the priority directions of our activities, so we may cooperate in that area.
Інформ, чи можете ви, будь ласка, сказати, чи подали ЗМІ за
Good morning, Anna Ukrinform. Could you please tell if the media submitted any applications for participation in the projects and how many of them are local and how many are those relocated?
We do have those numbers, but I don't have them entirely to hand, but we have 12 and a dozen applications, something like that. We have processes ongoing. We keep these competitions transparent. So we're the calls and tenders are offered, the projects are available, and people apply. Groups and individuals can apply to them, and they're assessed according to criteria. So we keep it quite transparent, and there's a team specifically working on that. And I think some of the first grants, several of the grants actually were underway when the war started, so they were refashioned. Some of them have been recently agreed, and I think there's a current tranche which are being considered just at the very moment. But I can get you the details. We're talking 12, approximately 12, plus or minus for the different rounds, and in that range, I believe.
Я можу трошки
I can add a little bit. First of all, we support the journalists who prepare the materials for us. The frontline materials, what I mentioned, we have a network of around 60 journalists who write something for us, and we have a micro grant system that we identified as priorities. They are the local media, which are or located media, or the media along the front lines. Those are the micro grants, small funding that would allow the editorial to have themselves maintained for some time, for like a 3 months, for example. The media submits the applications in a very active manner. There were 8 relocated media, and the rest of them, they continue working in the areas along the front lines. If you're interested, we can communicate, and I may name all of them. I think that was one media outlet from Bakhmut that was relocated. Svetlana Galuta, Ukrinform. I have a personal question to you. You were meeting a lot of journalists. You were seeing and hearing their tragic stories, lots of them. And Miss Olga is from Kharkiv. There were 5 powerful explosions in Kharkiv today. It all burns out your soul, and I would like to ask how do you protect yourself morally? How do you work with this? How do you live with this? Where do you take your strength from?
That's a very significant question, and I'm really grateful that you give it, and it's quite an emotional question. Actually, I would have to say that I have been here and I have done an amount of journalism, and I've been really honored to do it, to serve that witness and be with the people who've had such tragic circumstances. There are many international journalists and Ukrainian journalists working on a more sustained basis than I, so I would defer to them how they manage it, where their challenges is much higher. But what I would say is that it's about the people you're with and what they go through, and your situation is really quite secondary to what they're experiencing and what they share with you, what they give with you. If I can just think of some of the sources, even in Kherson just a couple of days ago, we're really aware anytime you do an interview what you're asking somebody to do, which is to relive the worst moments of their life and tell it to me in public. It's a really big thing to ask. So we're really so impressed and so sensitive and aware of what the journalist act actually is. But at the same time, we balance the reality that you have a deadline, you've got to get it right, you have to get it quick, and you've got to go. So I often try in my mind to balance the fact that I'm somehow piecing together a puzzle, which is a product which I have to produce on the one hand. On the other hand, I'm engaged in one of the most intense pieces of human communication that could possibly be undertaken. You're sitting under shelling, asking somebody how their experience was. So really all you can do is to try to keep your balance and keep your humanity as present as you can. But my heart goes out to every person that I interview with gratitude and the enormity of what they're really expressing. It's really hard hard to express. The beautiful lady we saw in Kherson, we asked her, you know, we apologized for asking her to tell the story, because clearly it was submerged pain that she was keeping, and she just said, well, yes, but I think the information needs to get out and the world should know. So that's really why we do it, and that's why we put ourselves through it. It's much easier for me because I can leave, I can take a break, and it's important for me anyway to get out of that, and especially Ukrainians can't just leave the zone. And you have to think about that war mentality and how hard it is to live in it at all times, because it can be overwhelming, for sure.
Я, мабуть, також доповнюю, відповідаючи на ваше питання, я скажу, я не знаю насправді, звідки береться баланс.
Well, I don't really know where people get this balance, where they get the strength to go further, to keep walking, because it's extremely important. I understand that all those stories, all those eyes, tears, emotions, they remain with you for a long time, and you can act professional, and no matter how emotional is the project, sometimes you have deadline and there is no just time for emotions, but after the project is over, you may face these emotions like just in front, or be left with these emotions in front of you, because you have time to think through them. And I think the victory we will have will be very difficult, because we will be able to let our emotions out, because we understand that now we have to keep walking, we have to be professional. But what's frightening, what's really frightening, I don't know what to do in this situation, and I don't know where this balance comes from. I'm surprised myself. You keep joking, you keep walking, you keep supporting the people who feel it more difficult than you do, and it's maybe our common national feature.
That there are groups who work on journalists' healthfulness. The DART Center is one of them, good friends and colleagues of ours, and others. So there are resources available to journalists who do have concern about this, and editors should be very aware of their journalistic colleagues to make sure that their war feelings are not getting in the way of their responsible security protocols and so forth, and also that they can keep a balance. So it's a really great question, and a terribly important one to keep in mind at all times.
Дякую. Ще є питання? Okay, so I think we can finish in this issue, and maybe you want to add something at the end.
Well, yes, just to say again that it's a great honor to be here, to share this time with you, but most of all to partner with our Ukraine colleagues and staff and our Ukraine beneficiaries and partner organizations to really assist in not only building journalism, but really confronting this terrible lie, which is having such an awful consequence, and which every day we can see, and do it in the right time. Ukraine will come through, and come through brilliantly. So we will be with you as long as we possibly can.
Thank you.
Дякую.
Дуже конструктивно вийшло.